In a tragedy that has shaken Washington, D.C. and ignited a nationwide debate over security, immigration, and federal vetting procedures, a young National Guard soldier, 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom of West Virginia, has died after being ambushed and shot during a patrol near the White House, prompting both grief and outrage as political leaders, law enforcement officials, and intelligence experts grapple with how a trusted Afghan asylum recipient with a CIA-linked past could perpetrate such a deadly attack in the nation's capital. The news of Beckstrom's death was confirmed by President Trump during a Thanksgiving Day call with deployed service members, where he paused his remarks to deliver what he called heartbreaking news, describing Beckstrom as a highly respected, magnificent young person who began her service in June 2023 and had been regarded as outstanding in every way. Her passing came just hours after she underwent emergency surgery following the Wednesday attack that occurred only blocks away from the White House perimeter, a location many consider among the most secure in the world. Yet it has now become the site of one of the most shocking breaches of safety in recent memory. Meanwhile, the second guardsman, Andrew Wolf, remains in critical condition, fighting for his life as his family pleads for national prayers, with loved ones describing him as a well-liked former varsity baseball player known for his kindness and loyalty. The suspect, a 29-year-old Afghan national whose name officials have not yet released, entered the United States earlier this year after being granted asylum and had previously worked with a CIA-supported counterterrorism unit during the war in Afghanistan. Credentials that should have indicated a strong degree of trustworthiness but that are now being re-examined with a growing sense of alarm. According to Fox News correspondent Madeline Rivera, federal investigators are already preparing to upgrade charges against the suspect, especially in light of Beckstrom's death, with Judge Jeanine Pirro warning that first-degree murder charges are all but certain if Wolf does not survive. The revelation that the alleged shooter came into the U.S. through an expedited asylum process, despite having undergone what intelligence agencies insist was a vigorous, wartime vetting program that included biographic checks and in-person interviews, has triggered an intense national conversation about the reliability of such screenings, particularly for individuals arriving from what experts repeatedly characterize as terrorist hotbeds. Former Assistant FBI Director Chris Swecker noted that post-withdrawal Afghanistan remains a haven for both Al-Qaeda and ISIS, making it a region that demands especially rigorous scrutiny. Swecker argued that while tens of thousands of Afghan nationals were resettled quickly following the fall of Kabul, it appears that many were admitted with little to no long-term monitoring once inside the United States. He emphasized that proper vetting is only the first step. Ongoing follow-up, behavioral checks, and periodic security reviews should have been standard procedure for anyone arriving from a region so deeply entwined with extremist groups, even those who previously cooperated with U.S. intelligence missions. Swecker expressed skepticism about the completeness of the suspect's background verification, noting that Afghanistan's collapsed institutions mean there are often no reliable records to examine, leaving vast blind spots in the vetting process. The political ramifications of the attack have been immediate and sweeping. President Trump, speaking only hours after Beckstrom's death, pledged to enact sweeping reforms to immigration and asylum policy, declaring that he would pause migration from certain countries, terminate illegal admissions, revoke federal benefits for non-citizens, conduct a full review of green cards and asylum approvals issued under President Biden, and deport any foreign national deemed not a net asset to the country. He also vowed to expand denaturalization efforts targeting individuals who pose any semblance of a security risk. These declarations have already drawn criticism from immigration advocates and a number of congressional leaders who argue that such broad restrictions unfairly stigmatize entire populations and undermine America's long-standing commitment to offering refuge to allies and vulnerable individuals. However, supporters insist that Wednesday's attack underscores an urgent need to reevaluate the rapid Afghan refugee resettlement program launched under Biden, emphasizing that even a small number of improperly screened individuals can pose severe risks to national security. Swecker, echoing these concerns, said the Biden administration's admission of what he estimated as 17 to 18 million migrants over recent years, many without complete background verification, has strained the country's ability to maintain comprehensive oversight. He argued that U.S. intelligence agencies cannot reliably vet individuals coming from failed states or conflict zones where criminal histories, extremist connections, and identity documentation are often non-existent. In those cases, migrants essentially enter the U.S. as ghosts, he said, warning that some may be vulnerable to radicalization or exploitation by extremist networks. Swecker also noted that this incident should prompt an extraordinary reevaluation of post-Afghanistan withdrawal asylum pathways, especially given that many evacuees were brought into the U.S. under emergency circumstances with limited documentation. The attack has also revived painful memories of the chaotic 2021 U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, with critics arguing that the rushed nature of evacuation flights, carrying tens of thousands of civilians, made proper screening impossible. While many Americans felt deep sympathy for families fleeing Taliban rule, others feared that security lapses could one day result in violence on U.S. soil, a fear that now appears chillingly prescient for those who warned of long-term risks. Even more troubling to many observers is the fact that the suspect's background appeared, at least superficially, to fit the profile of a trustworthy ally. He had fought against extremist groups, served in a counterterrorism unit, and worked alongside American operatives. Swecker cautioned, however, that such credentials alone are not enough to ensure safety, particularly without ongoing monitoring after arrival in the U.S. He argued that individuals from high-risk regions should undergo regular mandatory reporting, similar to parole officers checking in with convicted offenders, until long-term trust can be confidently established. As funerals and vigils begin, attention is turning to the lives of the victims, both of whom volunteered for National Guard duty in Washington, D.C. despite their young age. Beckstrom, who joined the Guard at just 18, had been described by her commanding officers as highly disciplined and exceptionally dedicated. Local leaders in West Virginia have expressed profound sorrow, calling her death a devastating loss for the entire state. The outpouring of grief has been matched by calls for unity and accountability, with many arguing that the attack represents not only a failure of security but also a betrayal of trust toward young service members who expect their government to protect them from preventable threats. Swecker, who previously served alongside National Guard troops in Iraq, reflected that such individuals, many barely out of high school, represent the heart of American patriotism, answering the call to serve in dangerous roles despite personal risk. He noted that the trauma inflicted on their families will be immeasurable, especially given that both victims were still so early in their military careers. Public debate is now expanding beyond the circumstances of this attack to broader questions of national preparedness, intelligence gaps, and the vulnerability of domestic military patrols. Some lawmakers have already called for a congressional inquiry into how the suspect managed to transition from a vetted ally to a hostile actor, with several asking whether mental health issues, extremist recruitment, or personal grievances may have played a role. Others are demanding a full audit of Operation Allies Welcome, the federal initiative that resettled tens of thousands of Afghans after the U.S. withdrawal, arguing that inconsistent vetting procedures across agencies created dangerous gaps. There is also renewed debate about whether National Guard troops should continue patrolling high-visibility locations in D.C. without heavier protective measures, given that their uniforms and predictable routes may make them vulnerable targets. As the investigation continues, early reports suggest that significant red flags may emerge in the suspect's history. Swecker predicted that, as with many past mass shooters, hindsight will reveal a pattern of alarming behavior. Flashing red lights, as he described them, that went unnoticed or unreported. Whether these red flags stem from radicalization, psychological instability, financial stress, or domestic turmoil remains unclear, but investigators say they are examining the suspect's communications, online activity, and personal relationships. They are also probing whether he acted alone or if any external influence, foreign or domestic, may have shaped his actions. Meanwhile, the nation remains in mourning. Flags in several states, including West Virginia, have been lowered to half-staff in Beckstrom's honor. Across social media, thousands of Americans have expressed condolences for her family and for Wolf, whose community has organized prayer vigils and support drives. At the same time, political tensions surrounding the tragedy continue to intensify, with immigration activists urging caution against broad generalizations and security advocates insisting that the attack represents a critical turning point requiring immediate policy change. With emotions running high and investigations underway, Washington finds itself navigating the delicate intersection of grief, security, and national identity as leaders confront the sobering reality that even the nation's capital, surrounded by the most layered security architecture in America, remains vulnerable to the unpredictable consequences of global conflict and flawed vetting systems.